My name is JT Mollner, and my film is Strange Darling.
Do you have a favorite serial killer?
I think maybe as far as the real ones go, maybe Ed Gein is the most interesting to me because there were so many films based on his his life's work, so to speak. Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the films were so different from the actual killer, and I think it's interesting to see how the human brain kind of turns these real stories into fictional versions of them.
Well, I would like to you to tell us a little bit more how you developed the female character.
Yeah, you know, like I said, I knew it was going to take place over the course of like pretty much one day, and I wanted to. It was really sort of an exercise in minimalism. I wanted to, I usually overwrite movies when I work on films. At my first drafts are 200 pages sometimes, or 250 pages, and then I have to spend months or weeks whittling movies down to a proper length. And with this movie, from the very beginning, I wanted to tell it as simply and sparingly as possible, but also find a way to reveal as much about these characters as possible while being simplistic narratively, not psychologically. So, for the first, I think maybe 20 minutes of the movie, there's no dialogue. And that was really important to me to show a glimpse into who these people are just based on behaviors. But then we get into another scene that's very heavy on dialogue for a little while, and it just became really important to me to take the audience on a ride and reveal more and more, peel more and more layers back as far as who these characters are as the film goes on. So there's maybe an explosion of violence. Or an explosion of intensity, and then there'll be sort of a quiet moment, and then another explosion of intensity, and then a quiet moment. And through those big moments and through the quiet moments, there's unique ways, hopefully, that we're able to reveal more and more about that character, both those characters, in a short amount of time with a simple narrative approach. And so I hope that, even though it only takes place in the matter of one day, I hope that the audience in the final moments is able to have developed a sort of attachment to our lead, and to have some compassion for our lead, and both characters actually a little bit, because a lot of the movie's about gray area and moral subjectivity and ambiguity, and how nobody, no matter what their behavior is, there's really very few human beings, or probably none, who are all good or all evil. And I like to find the humanity in the characters in this movie.
I think one of the deeper levels, or one of the yeah, the multiple levels of the film is also added to it through since you use this classical gender roles, and that they both don't fit into them, and then the two cops copy
Mm.
that again. And so this, how, why was it so important for you to use this gender specific characters or roles actually?
I think it's really I become fascinated with different things when you start to write, and one of the things that I just find compelling right now for some reason is the gender expectations, and what we expect from genders, and how binary not all of us, but how binary society seems to treat gender expectation. And so it just became really like interesting and fun, uh, creatively, creatively very satisfying to delve into those expectations and those tropes and those stereotypes. I mean, this whole movie really was an exercise in expectation and stereotyping, you know. And the most important thing was just subverting those expectations and kind of reminding reminding us as a society, not to not to think in such simple terms, you know. And you know, I think a lot of people talk about that now, and but it was just, I thought it was just a fun and exciting and compelling thing to explore, like those sort of expectations. And you know, we use very hyperbolic and extreme examples here. It's like, I remember watching The Phantom Thread for the first time, and I just love that film so much, and I think it's one of the greatest love stories ever made. And the reason I loved it is because it was so deeply romantic. At the end of The Phantom Thread, these people accept each other for exactly who they are. And when I tell people how romantic I think that movie is, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're crazy! Like, she's poisoning him," or what, you know, the stuff that happens in that movie. And for me, it's just those extreme things that happen at the end of that movie are just sort of metaphors for, you know, just deep acceptance. And so there's a lot of metaphor in this film that we're playing with, about, you know, expectation and love and connection, people yearning for a connection, all these different things. And you know, you can plug anything you'd like into the equation, but it's not necessarily, you know. I just thought murder was the most compelling and extreme way to sort of play with these expectations and subversions.
About Willa Fitzgerald, did you think of her quite early on when you were writing the role?
No, but I think of her quite early on now when I'm writing everything, because I loved working with her so much, and she was a incredible discovery. I had seen a movie called The Goldfinch that she was in, and I liked her very much in it, but I hadn't seen any of her expansive TV work. And she was recommended to me after we'd already had a list put together of other actors. She was recommended to me first by my editor, Chris Bell, who I trust very much. He was cutting another movie that hasn't been released yet that he was working on, that she was in. And he lives about 4 houses down from me in Los Angeles. And I went down to his house, and he said, I'm watching this actress in this movie, and she's incredible. You should consider her for the new movie you're casting. And I saw some clips of her, and she was really amazing. And then just around the same time, her agent, Christy Hall from Paradigm, who I have a good friendship with, called me and said, I have this actor you have to look at for this role. And I was actually interested in some of the other actors she had who I was more familiar with. And she sent me, you know, I started watching everything with Willa in it, because Roy Lee, our producer, and my editor, and this agent were just, you know, really into her and were pushing her. So I started watching footage, and I really was a fan. But I hadn't seen her do anything quite like this, which was exciting to me, because I definitely didn't want to cast somebody who'd done this before, or, you know, something too much like this before. So we had a meeting, and she really had a great understanding for the character, a lot of compassion for the character, and she really just loved who this character was, and she wanted to be the lady, and she wanted to inhabit the lady. And so I just couldn't be happier with the decision to cast her in this film, because I can't imagine anybody else in it.
Well, the story is told in a non-chronological way. And did you shoot also? Like, how did you shoot? No, in the same way as we see it, or in a more chronological way?
It was a very low budget movie, so we shot the best way for my first AD to keep us on budget, and our line producer to keep us on budget. So we shot, you know, in a total mess of out of order of out of order shooting. But it was actually, you know, we did get to shoot there's these long sequences. So, there's the whole section in the hotel room, and then there's the whole section in the truck. And whenever we got into a section, we did shoot the section in order. So we were able to, these sort of 6 chapters, like even though we shot them all over the place, I don't even remember the exact order. But once we got into a scene, we were able to spend 3 or 4 days on it, which was nice.
You shot on 35 millimeters, and I was wondering, since it's more rare that cinemas or theaters show the films on 35 millimeters, why it was still important for you to shoot on this material?
Yeah, that's a great question because I love talking about film. It's never been an option for me to shoot any way else, or any other way. It's weird. I started doing short films like almost 15 years ago, and it was in a time when everybody was shooting digitally. I mean, it was having this huge upsurgence in the late 2000s and the teens, and everybody who was making low budget or short films was shooting digitally. And the movies I grew up with, that I watched in the 90s when I was a kid, or the movies that I watched from the 70s when I started watching films in the late 80s and 90s, it was those movies looked a certain way, and they looked like cinema. They looked painterly, and the filmmakers who I respect and admire, there's something about the look of those movies that resonates with me, and there's a depth and a softness and the texture. And so when everybody was shooting digitally, I kind of said, is there a way to do this like they used to do it? And so I, instead of shooting 20 short films over the course of 8 or 9 years, I shot 5 because I would spend the time and raise the extra money to shoot film. And the same thing with my features. I go in to a meeting and I pitch a movie, and I'm super grateful when I get a movie financed, but I tell them there's one thing that is not debatable, and it's that I'm shooting film. And I still try and get convinced to shoot otherwise, but we've found a really good way. My team and I have found really creative ways to keep the budget low, even while shooting film, and it saves a lot of money in post because the way we capture it is the way you see it. So Giovanni Ribisi, who was the DP on this, and I had a deep connection over film, and that's why we decided to do this movie together. And it's just, there's nothing like it. I even like the process of shooting better on film because you can't get as many takes and overshoot, which keeps you disciplined. You have to plan a lot. But it also just ups the game of everybody on set, the actors, the crew. When they hear that film rolling, there's a reverence around it. And, filmmaking's like church to me. It's a very special place, experience. And film keeps it special for everybody, I think.
There's a lot of red in the film, the clothes, the car, the hair. Why? What is your connection with this color? Do you have a special connection to it?
I was one time I heard David Lynch in an interview, and somebody was asking him what his movie meant, and he said it's not meant to be understood, it's meant to be felt. And so I was thinking a lot about that when I was writing this movie. It was all about a feeling, a fever dream, an intensity, and it wasn't about a specific socio-political message. It was about a feeling. Like I wanted to really immerse people in a certain feeling. And red came to me just like the music came to me as I was writing. And it's such a passionate, intense, volatile color that can mean different things at different times. And in the film, in different scenes, it means different things to me. But I want people to sort of feel the feeling that I felt as I was writing this, and the red was the best. It was just it was a red movie. I just knew that. I knew it was primary colors. It was reds and blues at times when we want to kind of take people into a different feeling, and those were the colors the movie had to be, along with a lot of black. And I knew we wanted to keep all the tertiary colors out of it. It just wasn't this movie was a primary color film and mostly red, and so very inspired by films like Dead Ringers and The Devils, and Blue Velvet, and I was watching a lot of very colorful movies that evoked intense emotions in me before I wrote this, and I wanted to kind of bring that feeling through for the audiences too. So yeah, there's a lot of red in the movie, and I think I'm writing a film right now, and there's a lot of purple in the movie. Sometimes just movies have a certain feeling to me, and the feeling has a lot to do with the color. And I'm going to lean into that in a major way, on my next film, because I'm still in that mood, but it's not a red mood anymore.
But is it also a fantasy thriller, as a fantastic film, or more a thriller story again, or
With
how? The
what
next
I'm
one?
doing,
Mhm.
uh, there's a few possibilities for what could end up being the next one, but the thing I think is going to be the next one is yeah, it's definitely it's a love story, and it's a thriller, and it's a little bit of a horror film. So it's sort of a yeah, I'm deeply romantic, and I also like horror. So I try and find ways to to fuse that. And so we'll see if that works out. But I'm actually writing. I'm up. The reason I'm in this hotel lobby because the internet went down in the building I'm staying in. But I'm actually up in the Central Coast, staying in a cabin at this place. Because I'm writing a movie that takes place partially here, and I wanted to sort of immerse myself in that process. So I'm spending the rest of the day writing and part of the day doing these with very kind people like you who like the movie.
Why are motels so good horror film elements?
I have a thing. The hotel in the movie was very specific. The Blue Angel sign and all that. And I am really obsessed with road trips. I grew up, reading books by Jack Kerouac and watching road movies, and I just love being on the road, and I prefer it to flying. I fly all the time, but when I can drive, I drive. When I'm shooting across country, I'll try and take a few days to drive instead of fly, because I like being on the road and it's peaceful to me. And so I've spent a lot of time. I've driven across the country more times than I can really count, and I like to find interesting motels that represent like a bygone era of America, and there's places in Tucumcari, New Mexico, and that have old hotels on Route 66, old motels, roadside drive-in motels, and they're disappearing and being replaced by corporate chains fast. But I still seek them out and find them. And there's a number of places I really like in Central California, driving between Los Angeles and San Francisco, and that's where I am right now. And so these places have always been inspirations for me, and I feel creative when I stay at them, and I wonder what's happened in these rooms before I was here, like especially places that have been around for nearly 100 years now. At least 70. A lot of the places that you stay, that have this sort of old school flavor, and that the motel in the movie was very much inspired by the old Road 66 motels. One is called the Blue Swallow that I've been to in Tucumcari, New Mexico, that looks a lot like this motel. And then there was a place called the Blue Angel in Las Vegas, where I grew up when I was a little kid. They've torn it down, but I remember that sign. And so I sort of fused those two ideas, created this motel. And the interesting thing is, I didn't, even though the movie's scary, I wanted to play against that in a way. So a lot of, the bright, colorful, beautiful stuff that you see in the daytime scenes, and even the motel in the nighttime scenes. I know some people find it creepy, but it's actually just a version of a place I'd like to stay. like this is strangely, like there's a lot of comfort food in this movie for me. Like I like the feeling and sort of the lost highway elements, the the it's all inspired by these places that you can pull over that are unique to the American West and these open expanses of highway. Once you get off the interstate and you start driving on state roads, you can find these motels and these diners and these places where the same people are working there who were working there 60 years ago half the time. And the only thing that looks different than it did 30 or 40 years ago are the cell phones, you know? And so I just wanted to kind of find a pocket of America or recreate those sort of pockets of America that interest me and inspire me and compel me to create when I'm driving. And so that was the reason for the motel in the movie. I don't think it's as scary as the Psycho hotel or anything like that. And I wasn't leaning into the scare factor. I wanted to make it peaceful, romantic, weird, but these horrific things have the potential of happening in these very kind of mundane, not mundane, but very seemingly peaceful places, including the house, you know, where a lot of the movie takes place. So yeah.